Our Honorable Ambassador, thanks very much for taking the time. I could see you're a master of diplomacy, as expected. Let me start off by just appreciating again the organization that has gone into this and acknowledge our Honorable President in absentia. But quickly, let me invite my colleagues, those who are here, invite my colleagues to join me. Invite my colleagues to join me, please. What is that? Okay. Invite my colleagues. Please, let's hurry up. We don't have much time. People are hungry. Yes. Yes. Yes, I don't know. Yeah. Two things that I need to indicate. There's a drama presentation by our youth, but because drama is part of literature, we are going to integrate it into the material we are going to be. So they are going to perform first, and then the speakers. So drama, as we all know, is part of literature. I also want to ask our senior comrade, Wally Serote, if he's here. Oh, Serote, please, could you just join us? Wally Serote, he's as we all know, he's our current poet laureate. And I think it's only appropriate that he joins the session on literature. And because of the range of his experience and the depth of his understanding, we're going to ask him to summarize the presentations at the end. So thanks very much, Wale, for being here. Let me, before our youth come in, just to raise a few questions that are going to organize this session. The first one, I want to repeat what I said yesterday. We have been talking about Pan-Africanism for the last 60, 65 years, if not more. There's a huge literature on Pan-Africanism. And Pan-Africanism has had, various articulations. I won't go back there. So there's a whole literature, much vaster and much deeper than we can cover here. What I was pleading, that a time has come for us to have a comprehensive, integrated social and economic impact of Pan-Africanist thought. There's no point, colleagues, rehearsing old positions, echoing and re-echoing old positions. These positions have been dealt with extensively. So as we go on reflecting on Pan-Africanism, let's take some time to assess its impact on our social and economic relations. That is important. That will need, at a very high level, a kind of inter-science, an interdisciplinary approach into Pan-Africanism. Let us do that. It's important that we stand back and reflect. The second thing that, I want to suggest, Freedom Park and the University of South Africa have a partnership now to produce a book entitled Social Memory as a Force for Change. Freedom Park, a few years ago, produced a book where Wally Serote and others contributed. It's called Freedom Park as a Place of Memory and of Contemplation. brilliant volume of essays going back. Mandela has a preface, Thabo Mbeki has a preface, Kgalema has a preface, a brilliant which you should look at very, very carefully. But in Freedom Park at UNISA, we decided that no, a time has come for us to write a sequel to that book. And the sequel is entitled Social Memory as a Force for Fundamental Change. It is one thing to remember and to celebrate our heroic past. It's another and a much more urgent thing to say how can we use memory to solve current and emerging problems. So that memory is not just a moment of aesthetic delight, of chest-thumping heroism, but a moment where you say all that knowledge, that goes back to Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, all that knowledge, how can we use it to make changes today? So the two books read each other. And the second volume that's going to be published by UNISA Press, perhaps early next year, deals with the practical uses of social memory. I think it's the final thing that I want to suggest. We have been reading African literature for in various languages. But nowhere in the scholarship has the impact of African literature on our lives been assessed. Nowhere. There's been a lot of research on music, how music transforms both our personal and our social lives. But there's been no research on the personal and social value of African literature. So it's important for us again, and that's the second research project, to come out with an interdisciplinary research to assess the social, economic, political, and cultural impact of African literature. Finally, to do that, we have been reading Chinua Achebe for years. Wole Soyinka, Eskia Mphahlele, Ngugi. We have done that for years. We have taught some of us this for years in various countries. I think it's important for us to say, do we have a reading public in Africa sensitive enough to understand and appreciate and make full use of the best that has been thought by Wole Soyinka? Do we have a reading public? There is no study of reading patterns in Africa. No study. So we continue, writing poems, novels, and we don't know whether who is reading them and why they are reading them, if they read them at all. And now to anticipate our youth. We grew up in a literate, in a logocentric culture where, in the beginning there was a word and the word was made flesh, where writing was primary, and so was reading. So if you look at our educational policy in Africa, the focus is on writing and reading. But these kids spend a lot of time listening, hearing. So in the society of the spectacle, in the society of the audiovisual media, we might begin to find out how we can use the best insights in African literature and communicate them through the medium that preoccupies them every day. Very few of them read novels 200 pages long. Very few of them are going to read an academic essay 40 pages long. They've been brought up in a culture where they hear, as they walk around from bus stop to bus stop, they are hearing in the walkways. If you want to be pragmatic, let's find sophisticated ways in which we can use the audiovisual media to communicate to the young the best that has been thought and felt in African literature and African thought. I think it's important. With that, let me allow our youth to come and participate in this dialogue. Thank you.
We are one. We may sway from side to side by the hardships of our daily lives. We may differ in terms of skin color, culture, hair, taste and fashion. But what really binds us together? Humanity. We are all human beings with diverse and special talents. Our veins pump the same red blood. Our rebel nation breeds uniqueness. There is no other continent that is as vibrant as Africa. The soil we walk on top of gives us rhythm that encourages our soul to beat in unity. Therefore, have got to stay true to who we all are and embrace our diversity and freedom, of course. Africa. Africa is my home. I love South Africa.
We coming from the motherland. Iyewo, KwaZulu Natal. We have 9 provinces, Free State, Western Cape, Gauteng, do you know Soweto, Mandela, Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, Mpumalanga, Northwest, Limpopo, Dompo, KwaZulu Natal. Aye, Africa. Africa.
We Africans. We, the spark of creation. We, First Nation of Nations. Remember us. For you flow from our ancestral streams, and your hopes are what mirror our dreams. remember us. For you pulse with the blood of our veins, and you cry with the fear of our pain. We, Africans, we, the refugees of high seas, we, the keepers of memories, remember us. For you pass with the blood of our veins.
We are Africans. We, the scattering of the rising sun. We are proud of Africans. Everyone celebrates with us. For our future fates, we are far from the done.
I'm sure there's something that dance and song can do that words can't. Let me call on, and as you come in, please just introduce yourself. Professor Mchombo, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I introduce myself as Kingo Mchombo, and I am from the International University of Management, where I am the acting Vice Chancellor. I want to start by thanking the organizers for inviting me here, but I want also to say something. I want to say that as we're here to critique and celebrate Africa's search for revival and dignity, there are people in Africa who do not have that. There are people who are not free. I heard many times that every country in Africa is free, but I'm afraid it's not true. There is one country. It's called Western Sahara, where the people have not yet achieved independence. They're occupied and they're still fighting. So let's not forget them. Let's not forget their cries. Let's not quietly agree that we should ignore their quest for dignity, their quest for freedom, because they too deserve it. I want to say I'll make about 4 points. My first point will be whose knowledge counts. My second point will be on African literature and indigenous languages. Why is it important? My third point will be on media and the image it creates of Africans. What is it we should do there? And I'll make a few recommendations if time allows me and if the chair allows me. The word whose knowledge counts really refers to the fact that those who are powerful, their knowledge is regarded as more important than those who are weak. And if you speak, there are two people speaking. The one who is well-dressed, the one who looks smart, their knowledge is regarded as being more important than the one who looks poor, homeless. No one cares too much about that. In the words of one of the writers on development, Robert Chambers, he said about development of human beings, is about how we look at these knowledges which come from various sources. So we should never talk of one knowledge. We should talk of multiple knowledges and look at these knowledges in terms of what do they talk to? How do they address the problems people face? Because if we look only at dominant knowledge, then we will ignore indigenous knowledge systems, and which is what we're here to critique and discuss. When we talk about indigenous knowledge, on the one hand, we have the marginalization of this knowledge, that nobody really cares too much. I think the young people here have told us many times they don't know too much about their own knowledge. They know about Western knowledge, about Shakespeare, about that, about the other. But what about our own knowledge? And I think that is a very important point you have raised. But there is a contradiction. And the contradiction is like this. Although this knowledge is marginalized, there's a lot of stealing of this knowledge. In Southern Africa, we have heard the story of the Hudea plant, the knowledge of the sun, stolen, and it was eventually recovered via the intervention of the South African government and other governments. But we have had many cases like that where this knowledge is pirated, patented elsewhere, and turned into commercial use. So there is this contradiction. If it is not useful, then why is it stolen? You don't steal something that is not useful. And that, to me, is a very important point, which should remind us that our knowledge is worth keeping, is worth preserving, and is worth looking after. The issue of history, our history, is for us to take care of it. It began a long time ago. I think one of the writers of early history, if you can call it that, Hugh Trevor Roper, said the history of Africa is really the history of Europeans in Africa, because Africans do not have a history, which is a false statement. That's why you hear these stories about Livingstone discovering Victoria Falls, Rebman discovering Kilimanjaro, and all of this nonsense, which is utterly false. It is indeed the same as I think one of the young men said here earlier about learning about Shakespeare as part of English literature, not remembering that, in fact, it's not English literature you should be learning about. It's literature written in English. And that turns it around a bit, completely. And you are learning literature that is written in English, so it's much broader. But of course, there is a battle there that has to be fought and won. And this is a battle of the mind of the curriculum developers who do not understand these things so broadly. When we talk about African literature, that's my second point, and indigenous languages, there is a lot of African literature. It's not true to say there isn't enough African literature. There's a lot of it. The fact that we may not know about it does not mean it does not exist. There's a lot of African, enough to cover the curriculum of secondary schools and high schools anywhere in this continent. The problem is those who are teaching literature may not be aware of this broad literature which exists. Of course, we talk about people like Chinua Achebe and their famous books like Things Fall Apart as part of this decolonization process. One element in some of these books, obviously, is that when you read them through, in the end, it's those people who were fighting for decolonization who were defeated, which to me says that they say the story has ended. I mean, when you read Things Fall Apart, in the end, the person who was standing to fight colonialism, he's the one who actually is utterly defeated. Those who are collaborators become the winners. So we have to be careful in terms of how we speak about this. But there are other stronger writers. Frantz Fanon has written a very interesting book, quite a number of books, The Wretched of the Earth, Black Skins and White Masks. And in all of them, he critiques and he looks deeply into what this colonialism has done to the minds of people and how it has made them think of themselves as a replica of the colonialists. In Black Skins, White Masks, he also goes a further step and looks at collaborators, what role they were playing. He talks in that particular instance of the role of the Senegalese soldiers in torturing and killing some of the liberation fighters in different countries in the world, and they had perfected this role, and they were being used all over. But collaborators in Southern Africa, we know too well about them. In Namibia, right now, there are quite a large group of the Kufuts. Those were the collaborators in Namibia. Now they are camped outside there. Apparently, they want to be given a pension for killing the people they killed during the liberation process. And no one takes them seriously, of course. We have, for young people like yourselves, Adichie Chimamanda, a Nigerian writer who is doing extremely well. She is one person you should read. She talked about black identity and how she has found herself in all these complex situations that are now evolving and are now current. But we have other older writers, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. That was not his first name, by the way. He wasn't Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He was James Ngugi. But through this process of decolonizing his own mind, he changed his name from James Ngugi to Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He has done a lot of interesting work in terms of coming up with ideas of how to decolonize the mind. Of course, in Southern Africa, we have Biko and black consciousness. That, too, is a very, very important writer. We have people like Achille Mbembe. They too have done extremely good work. So it's not true there isn't enough African literature. There's more than enough. The willpower is what is lacking. I want also to turn now to the issue of media and the images it creates of us and Africans. The media likes negative reporting. My young men there put it so well. They don't want positive reporting. They want negative reporting. And often this gets into our mind so much that when we speak only of the negatives. What has happened in Africa? Why aren't we developing? Why are we nothing? But you look at all these things which have been created and you call them nothing. Is the problem with your eyesight or the problem that those things don't exist? I feel that this Afro-pessimism is an extension of the media, which only reports on the negative. And I think now we have a big challenge, the new media content. So social media. Many of our young people use social media without awareness of that everything they put there is being analyzed and followed up by other people elsewhere. And I think the biggest problem we may face in future is that systematically our most influential young people are being targeted. They're giving these little scholarships, these little travel opportunities, but what they are doing is they are monitoring them to see who will become the future leaders. They're monitoring right now. And when they go there, the idea is to mentor them and tutor them so that when they become future leaders, they will never think of their country from their country's perspective, but they will think of their countries from the perspective of the masters. They learn to be servants in terms of their mental subjugation. And I think this is an area that is very important because now it's a battle of the mind. The mind is the battlefield. And when we look at how our newspapers report, one of the papers we have in Namibia, when I last week reported about former dictator Muammar Gaddafi and his family suing the government. This former dictator, this labeling, this is how they influence you to think of someone in particular ways. Not as simply the person who was murdered for giving his people water, for giving his people farmland, for turning the desert into productive land, but someone now who has to be labeled and categorized. And I think we need to be aware that there is a battle in front of us, and this is the battle of the mind. And the media is very important for this. And if I were to make a few recommendations, I would say, first of all, we need now to go towards the liberation of the mind. We're talking about the political liberation, the economic liberation, but I think the most important thing now is the liberation of the mind. How can we think as independent thinkers, but not as replicas? How can we not come up here and say, Africa has achieved nothing? It is not true. It can never be true. Africa has achieved something. We must learn to appreciate what has been achieved, because that is how we shall build. If you have one leg, use that leg to move forward. You're going to say, I have one leg, I will not move, I'll just stay here and beg. You have to appreciate what you have to build the future. Otherwise, you'll never build the future because you're paralyzed with your pessimism. I think we need to have IKS strengthened in our school curriculum so that our children know about their knowledge before they know about the knowledge of others. I think we need to train our journalists differently so that they learn to think before they give out these stories. It's not only the bad stories, but the good stories as well. I think we need to correct the images of black Africa as a place of inferiority, but look at it as a place of opportunity. And look at our own information literacy. What do you put up there in the media? That's a public sphere. It's not a private sphere. Even if the pictures you are taking them in your bedroom, you are putting them out there to other people as well. And what you do there in your bedroom becomes public knowledge. And some of it is very embarrassing, but many people are not aware of this. And we need to have this information literacy, media literacy, as part of training our children and training all of ourselves as well to know that this is a new sphere and it needs a new approach. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, Sanbonani. You are looking at a colonial project gone wrong in the sense that I'm an English scholar, I'm a professor of English, I teach Shakespeare. I have graduated many PhD students. I teach Shakespeare and they run away from my class because of the way in which I teach Shakespeare. Yes, I'm a princess in the true sense of the word, and then it really hurts me when I hear that my king must be disposed because that's a different administration. He doesn't administer the country. He is a head of state. He cannot take a term of office there. Undabezitha waphakathi. Okay, I'm born again. I'm born again. I want to start off with this question. Why was Aristotle in Egypt for 22 years? Why was Pythagoras in Egypt for 21 years? Before they could be admitted to the board of scholarship, what is it that they sourced from Africa? Africa has a history of a university in the 11th century AD, before colonialism visited us. What did that university teach? Even before the 11th century, what is it that those universities taught on our continent? Because it is very important, ladies and gentlemen, to know who you are. While I was studying in the US, I found myself wanting to actually leave the class and go elsewhere. After reading Aikwe Ama's Why Am I So Blessed? To have this scholarship that will tell me that I'm better than my sister. To have this scholarship that will tell me that I'm more intelligent than my mother. To have this scholarship that will tell me that I am a cut above the rest. Where does that scholarship come from? Why does it only privilege me? I just want to posit another point, that if we want to discuss language, if we want to discuss literature and its liberatory role in Africa, we would be making a very grave mistake to overlook the role of colonialism, what colonialism was all about. I know we start much earlier, but I've always zoned in very, very focusedly on Queen Victoria. Because Queen Victoria's regime, those prime ministers that she was, cycling, Benjamin Disraeli and Ewart Gladstone. Just go to YouTube. You don't read. Go to YouTube. Their most fierce weapon was language. Their weapon was to destroy whatever Africa had in terms of language and then replace it with another language. Their weapon was to destabilize the economic, the social, and the cultural activities of Africa. The cloth-making industries of Uganda had to be destroyed completely. The iron smelting enterprise of Ophipia had to go down. The salt industries, we've seen it coming. All the industries had to be destroyed because you must destroy before you can take over. But the most important of these was language. Language had to be the most important weapon of the colonialists. Go to the minutes of the Berlin Conference. Even if you're not a historian, just try and read the minutes of the Berlin Conference. Even though the Union Jack has left our land, why is the British Council here? I really want to know. I've stopped myself many times. I do qualify to apply for some of the jobs in the British Council, but I ask myself, why is the British Council here? This is my two pennies thought. Civilizations are rooted in their unique cultural environment. Each civilization embodies the wisdom and the vision of a country and a nation. And each civilization is invaluable for being its own. No civilization is superior to others. Africa's civilization was destroyed. So, colleagues, I want to say it is not a matter of just language and literature. Language and literature form a matrix of our civilization. My point is that even though today we're here at this time looking at how language and literature can function to assist us, to create that history of ideas, please keep in mind that it is a very, very complex matter. It is not only about language, even though language is a driver, because we need to reinstate the entirety of the African civilization. China has had its own. Europe has had its own. Now of late, we talk about the decadence of disciplines. The American studies is gone because it was a wave of civilization. What is the aim of our education when we're teaching? Where do we want to go? Where are we taking? What is the kind of the civilization that we want to bring through the children that we are taking? Briefly, as a literature specialist, I want to briefly say that I stand on authority, that only focusing on a particular era, maybe the 16th century England, or maybe the 20th century Africa, may actually shortchange your view in the broad function of literature. I know I'm dealing with two disciplines, that is indigenous languages, knowledges, and literature, and history. But in terms of our own civilization and the way in which we had packaged our literature, it is a cyclic entity. It begins at home when you're breastfeeding that baby, and you sing la 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 la. Then she begins to know that this is my mom. This is a soothing voice. Then from then on, he or she goes, to the larger part of the compound and attains more knowledge. Then from then on, we take the child off to the society, which is what Julius Nyerere calls the most important university of the child is the home. But have we checked with the coming of colonialism what the child learns after they leave our chambers, after they leave Amaguma Etu, after they leave Ikaya, and then they go out? We are throwing them there into a very, very strong civilization that came to destabilize the African civilization. So when we want to then transform the curriculum, in my mind, we need the old woman who tells the stories to form part of the curriculum that we have transformed, because this is a cyclic event, it's a cyclic system that has no beginning, no end. In the past, it's a keynote address that I have, but I'll just give you snippets. If you look at the journey of the African Writers series, that we have today. It was a series that was written to fight colonialism in its entirety. You can quote Things Fall Apart, where Okonkwo dies at the end. Okonkwo dies because he is warning us that heroes can die. The struggle is not over. But it's an entirety of a system that says, I want to represent myself in literature. I want to write about my own people in literature. So literature is an agent for change. It is a social map. It is, it teaches you the high science of analysis. You analyze societies through literature. It will teach you about the records. It is a record of a life of a people. So we do well in investing in literature because it tells us what our people are capable of. It is, the lighter side of history. It is the lighter side of, sociology. But literature is also a deep psychology, a mass psychology that analyzes the mind of a nation in particular periods of time. So it does entertain. We can't be taken away through entertainment only. If you were then to say, how do we move forward? I know I'm cutting a long story short. I just want to warn you that I have done isiZulu up to postgraduate level. And my take is that you cannot claim that the Zulu novel is an African novel. If you're still going to use formalism, if you're going to still use structuralism, why a novel? Why a novel? Why not Inganekwane? Why not grow the epics of the heroes? That is indigenous, in my view. I know I attract a lot of enemies when I say that. If you look at the isiZulu short story, and it's still bound by the prescripts of Edgar Allan Poe, who was freely writing for his friend Hawthorne in England, and now we prescribe that, we put it in the syllabus, that indaba emfushane mayibe nalog. That is a jacket of colonialism. Mazibuye masisweni. Professor Nkondo, I have about 10 recommendations. I'm not going to read them all. I'll read one. And my recommendation is this, that the children that we have put in school, it's like putting our own seed in a sea that is foreign, and we're giving them a toothpick to paddle in a foreign ocean to the shore. If we want to transform African studies, create an African university. Yes. Create an African university with its own new curriculum. Stop the silos. You can't transform African languages and leave the story of English and Afrikaans on the side. Talk about it. Break the silos. There is value in the ecologies of knowledges. Even if Shakespeare is not killed by me or by you, even if Rhodes is not killed by me or by you, by the mere fact that I'm standing here and I'm talking about Umkhai and I'm ignoring him, he may die, but he need not die because you will never know, Prof. Nkondo, how much Shakespeare appropriated from Africa if you don't read Shakespeare. You will never know how much, the Greeks appropriated from Africa. Dante himself, the depth of English literature, you will never know if you don't read the Timbuktu manuscript. So I will give you the recommendations for future projects, but I think African languages must be properly housed. African knowledges must be properly recognized. African studies, the African discipline must not be attached to anything else. And finally, to the young lions. 1 minute, 1 second. Finally, to the young lions. While I was living in Ethiopia, I was approached by the government of Malta. The government of Malta is seeking indigenous knowledge systems from our proverbs, our Izinganekwane, and so forth, because they want to put them on the digital media. For purposes of not just to say this is what Africa has, but to say they want to influence the theories of business studies. So it is possible to interpolate the disciplines, put them on a platform that is amenable to ourselves so that we influence, the trends of the time. Thank you.
Emotions piercing, heart pouring, blood eating on blank pages and souls rinse their eyes in words that remove cataract. Because hemorrhage is a navigator that leads generations to right paths. So let the ball pens be the drumsticks and the papers be the drums when you jot those verses. Let the ball pens be the drumsticks and the papers be the drums when you jot those verses. We are the traces of Biko's melanin, painting the unborn with the pigment. We write what we like when books written in the past tense do not make sense but insult the intelligence of those whose skin is a symbol that being black is not a matter of pigmentation, but a reflection of the mental attitude of the mind, of a way of life. Unlike the flying machines, we shall not be harnessed by altitude. We shall fly through the dark clouds to reach the black star that shines when the Transkei moon no longer shines. Through her words, Winnie Madikizela will be the Transkei moon that shines over the landscapes, where footprints of cattle stolen, blood spots of heart broken, the pale token accepted when Tsikana's prophecies were ignored like grievances of dwellers on scatter camps. Our tongues are bleeding, that's why I spit the pain. My fingers are aching, so I squeeze ball pens to produce the ink, the ointment that cure ailments that ooze past from the past and scratched by the present. I'm Yakim. That's why I rap these words like the song of life, because these are words untamed from a thought to a writing. The spares turned into pencils, the papers that shield. This is for the eyes to see and the mind to read when the pencil bleeds. Emotions piercing, heart pouring, blood inking on blank pages, and souls rinse their words in words that remove cataract. Unlike Umkhonto seas where we do not spear the nation. Unlike Umkhonto seas where we do not spear the nation, we heal the nation with words that paint pictures. Unlike Umkhonto seas where we do not spear the nation, we heal the nation with words that we heal the nation with words that
You'll find out, I'm talking to the young, you'll find out when meaning becomes very intense, words fail us, and we resort to silence. So silence at times is more expressive than words. Yeah. Let me just make a comment to our young scholars here. We are preoccupied with how we use English. But at time, I think after the last speaker, we should be more concerned with how English uses us. You see, for instance, if you read Dlomo's Valley of a Thousand Hills in isiZulu, and then you move from there to its translation, you will find that the English translation translates the Zulu landscape into an English topography. It's as if it's Wordsworth here, because the metaphors and the figurations here are so English that wherever it goes, it distorts and translates any landscape, any tomography in the image of English values. So it's very important for us to look very carefully. It's not how we use English, but how English uses you. It's very important that we do that.
Samago, greetings. May I please speak to the youth? I'll be letting myself down if I make sure these guys don't go home and actually watch something instead of what has been given. But before I say that, I'd like to apologize in advance because I'm speaking from spirit and not from my ego or mentality. I would like to say to you guys in uniform and not in uniform, one thing I'd like you to be careful. I'm not an academic. I've only got high school matric, but I've been teaching myself and I collect books. One thing I would like you to be aware of is don't be careful of tertiary institutions and studying. Don't let it make you indirectly worship English, because I've watched a lot of intellectuals talk on TV and live, and the more they express their intellectual ideas, the more it seems that they're indirectly praising English. So be careful and try to keep whatever you learn in tertiary, try to make sure you're able to express it in a simple way so that you don't lose the person who's 5 grades below you. So this is how I like to inspire you in terms of teach you the way I know how without being tertiary educated. This is my high school education to you, my way, contributing to this. Please write this down. I'd like you to Google these things. If you want to get an idea of where the 10 commandments come from, if you want to get guidance, spiritual guidance, moral guidance on what you are as a person spiritually, Google the 42 principles of Ma'at, 42 declarations of Ma'at. Ma'at is spelled M-A apostrophe on the top A-T, M-A space A-T. You find out for yourself who she is, what she stood for, and exactly what the 42 declarations are. If you like some guidance on how the other races were created, everyone, actually I'm tired of saying the word black, I'm tired of saying the word African. We are ebonoid. It's a game of the genes, it's survival of the genetics, the genotypes, who will survive the future. It's all about blood and genetics. So the ebonoid is the first race. The whole world was black, ebonoid, so to speak. So if you want to find out how the Chinese, which is called the yellow man, how the brown man, the Asians, Indians, so to speak, how the white man came about and how the albinos came about, that was a scientific experiment, so to speak. So the second thing I like to write down is Google the big-headed scientist. The big-headed scientist, or big-head scientist, as well as Google the black scientist. You can watch these things off YouTube because the best way you can learn, like when people are speaking here, most of us were on our cell phones. So if you want to be on your cell phone, go to YouTube and Google these things, the big-head scientist or the black scientist. If you like some information on how to find your voice as a young black person who has a fire, revolutionary spirit in them, I'm not saying that you can agree with everything, but also Google Dr. Umar Johnson. Umar is spelled U-M-A-R, Johnson is J-O-H-N-S-O-N. He will at least show you a practical way of how to speak and not compromise the fire within your soul, and he will at least give you a practical example of how to turn that anger within you that you're born as an African ebonoid and turn it into creativity and intellectual stimulation. If you'd also like to get inspiration on women who are really intellectual, Google Dr. Marimba Ani. Marimba is spelled M-A-R-I-M-B-A. Her surname is spelled A-N-I. That's Dr. Marimba Ani. And the last L that I'd like to say is Dr. John Henrik Clarke. John Henrik Clarke. Clarke is spelled C-L-A-R-K-E. Google these guys, find the information for yourself. I'm not saying agree, I'm not saying disagree, but the seed has been planted. You have the water, it's up to you what you're gonna do.
Sincere greeting to the esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, learners and participants. I'm actually giving a comment to the youth, and I'm also saying this, and I'll take this back to where I come from. Although we are 44 years from depleting the dark image that Africa has, are we willing to give in the work? Are we willing to change that? If there are footprints on the moon, one day there will be African footprints on the moon. Thank you.
We've learned a lot from this conference, and a way in which we will bring about change in a small start is by bringing awareness to our school and bettering ourselves for our future. Thank you.
Good afternoon to one and all. My name is Mangalisa Austin Cele. I'm from Fendel Combined School. What I've learned from this conference has inspired me to better myself as an individual. And I've learned that the small things actually make a very big difference. Thank you.
Good day to everyone. My name is Charity Mkunu, and I'm from Mungan Heights Secondary. I'm currently doing my grade 11 year. This is my personal summary about this entire event. Firstly, I'd like to give thanks to the organizers of this event and for giving us a platform as the youth to voice our thoughts and opinions about our very own continent, to share what we know and what we want for this continent. Thank you to all the speakers from yesterday and today for enriching our knowledge as the youth about what it is to be African, what is African dignity, and how can we restore and revive it. There is so much I've observed as a history student about our history, things I didn't even know, to be quite honest. So to my peers, I feel like the elders have spoken, have shared, and have enlightened us about so much. So what are we going to do with all of this information? As the youth, we hold so much influence in society. I feel like it's time we use the influence to advantage the right way. Use through the very same social media we're always active in, by informing others, by sharing something. Let someone know. I feel like one of the ways in restoring the Africa we want is by having more provincial programs like this. It shouldn't stop here. It shouldn't end here. In fact, it's actually the beginning in getting the Africa that we want in the agenda of 2063. There's exactly 44 years left, and as the youth, we are still going to be around to witness such moments. So now is the time to voice what Africa we want, and what are we going to do about it? I personally want an Africa where Africans are informed about their history, Africans to know their dignity, Africans to exercise their Africanism to the fullest. I want an Africa where domestic tourism is encouraged. I want an Africa where entrepreneurialism is encouraged to put an end to the socio-economic issue, which is poverty. I want an Africa where woman or the girl child no longer feels inferior or suppressed by owning her throne and being aware of the worth she holds and the power she possesses in this world. That is the Africa I want for this generation and the next. Ngiyabonga.
Evening, everyone. My name is Nobuhle Blose. I'm from Ferndale School. The fact that I was not eager or interested or excited to come here because I thought it would be something like political or something boring. I really regret that. This was actually a glimpse of the real world, and I met wonderful people like this woman here on my side. She even told me about that she graduated and then she's a professor of English, and then that we should focus on school first, and then after that we should focus on boys and everything that teenagers usually do. I'm happy that I came here. I met wonderful people, I met different schools that I know that are interested in this world. And then I'm very proud to say that I'm taking all this information back to our school. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. On Tuesday, I addressed the students at the UCT, gathering as big as this one. And I advised them as I want to advise you today. Please establish networks across campuses. Where you are alone, you won't have enough capacity. So please establish networks across your schools, between your schools and universities in the country. Only well-mobilized organic networks of students and the youth can change this country. Don't wait for government. Don't wait for parliament. Take sovereignty of the people very seriously and say, we can, if we are well organized and disciplined. Don't wait until you are so angry that you burn the buildings. Mobilize in a principled manner. You'll go very, very, very far. Very, very far. I forgot to say, this young African professor here, Wole Soyinka won the Nobel Prize for Literature. She is the chairperson of the world's Wole Soyinka, network. That's how far an African girl can go with willpower and with imagination and with support. And you can do it also. Yeah, I'm going to call you. Yeah. Let me just. Could the ambassador from Nigeria, the ambassador, could you come up, please?
All right. The Excellencies, participants, and especially the youth. Can you hear me? The youth. We are very, very fortunate this afternoon to have with us the Minister for Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs, but I know her more as the African Union chairperson that I worked with. And this is the only in history of the continent, this is the only mama who actually ran the organization on the continent for years. So give us and she did a wonderful job. She could have stayed if she wanted, but I think she changed her mind. But she worked also, and that's why perhaps I'm talking, she worked very closely with the Forum for Former African Heads of State and Government, and she provided a lot of support to the Forum for Former African Heads of State and Government. So that we have a privilege of having, you are always talking of the role of women, but we have had, for the first time on this continent, in how many years, I don't know, since 100 years or 200 years, a woman running the affairs of the continent. And today we are lucky to have with her here. So she doesn't have much time, but we're so happy that she can spend 5-10 minutes, especially with the students who are asking for her to say a few words on this conference, and then we'll see how we continue. Mama, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers for organizing this important intergenerational discussion. I think it's always important for different generations to come together. In the olden days, it was the older people who used to tell us about fairy tales, inganekwane, and before we go to sleep. So this is an important dialogue. But I was informed that the students want to ask questions. So I thought instead of me then just talking before I know what they want to know, because I'm told that they've looked at Agenda 2063 somewhat, and they have questions about it. And I thought, since we are short of time, we'll combine the two. They will ask the questions, and then in answering the questions, I'll also say a few words, if that's acceptable. Because I think it's good for them to ask the questions they want to ask. If that's acceptable, then I'll just take down the questions and deal with it.
Well, thank you very much. I missed a very important point, actually. She's the architect of Agenda 2063. So you are privileged today, you can ask questions. We have had many declarations before, but never Agenda 2063. So the youth, most of you have made reference to Agenda 2063, and the youth were asking, but what is exactly Agenda 2063, and what is our role? So now you have a chance to ask questions. Anyone with a question? The youth?
Sawubona. Ngiyaphila. Okay.
Use the mic. Use that mic. Okay, use that mic. Ask the question.
Okay. Okay. Greetings to everyone. My name is Nolaz Lamin from Ringen Heights Secondary, and my question is, it comes in a point where women have been drilled into them. This has been drilled into their minds since a very young age that the most important thing is marriage and women. So how will, for Agenda 2063, how will you encourage women, and how will you restore confidence back into women's lives? Thank you.
Good day to one and all, and Your Excellency. My question today is, how is South Africa with other African countries making their own route and path to success and setting its own foundation for these upcoming 46 years, and without implementing other overseas country ideas? Thank you.
Good morning to all. My name is Telugu Ndlovu from Apollo Secondary School. I'm here to plead with the minister today that could you please team up with our professors to come up with an organization that would at least consist of one educator and at least two school students, so that they could be taught about our history, because sometimes we found it difficult to interact with our teachers because they're sometimes strict with us. So now, if maybe one or two students could be taught closely by our professors, maybe that will be much, much easier for us to learn our history. Thank you.
Okay, we can take all that. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindelwa Kanyile from Vukuzakhe High School. What I like for the system of South Africa to do is to instill more skills in our schools than academics, because it's very saddening to see our brothers and our sisters failing to do well in academics. Well, they're so perfect in skills. And I think when you go to USA, you see kids at the age of 7, they're singers, because in their country, their system focus more on talent to make their country more. I think South Africa must do something like that. We need skills in our schools. We need more opportunities. We need more campaigns like this so that we can showcase our skills. I think we should not focus more. We can focus on academics, but skills should matter a lot than academics, because not all of us are well gifted in the mind. We are gifted in the hands. I think South Africa should really, you can go to Japan, go to USA, Dubai, everywhere. You will find kids at the age of 5, they are making apps, they are creating something beautiful with their hands. While in South Africa, we're still stuck in academics. We are brainwashing kids to learn. We learn every day, we are forcing them to know something that they cannot put in their minds, while their hands can make magic. I think South Africa should at least consider that.
Hi, my name is Wendy Njangase, and I'm from Ferndale Secondary School in Phoenix. My question is, why was corporal punishment banned? Because things are getting out of hands in school. Our parents are making it out there because there was corporal punishment back in the days. Don't you guys think that y'all are actually damaging our futures because y'all banned the corporal punishment? Shouldn't y'all bring it back? Because you'll keep on saying that you want us to we are the futures of tomorrow, but then you'll still don't want us to, upgrade, because you don't want to bring the corporal punishment back. Good evening. Once again, I have asked this question once before, but I would like to address it to the minister herself. Other than bringing about awareness, what does this conference? How does this conference bring about change in the future?
My name's Yageshni, and I just want to say that we deserve to be recognized. We've come so far, and if we can overcome something like apartheid, we can accomplish anything, long as we do it together. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Yes. Oh, okay, sir. I want to ask that, what can you do to the youth of South Africa for them to be proud of who they are and their dignity as young people?
I presume that these questions are to all of us.
Yes.
So they'll be answered by everybody. But let me first say that the forum, the former Heads of State Forum, I think is a very good forum in the sense that it brings a lot of experience from across the continent. But now that they have decided to join up with young people, then young people will bring the vitality and the curiousness and the innovation, and the combination would be very good. So thanks for this. I think let's try and situate my answer in Agenda 2063, and I'll try to answer your questions in that context. You know, when we started to think about Agenda 2063, it was because we were celebrating 50 years of the existence of the Organization of African Unity, which then turned to be the African Union. And in that celebration, we felt that a lot had been achieved by our forebearers.
I'm sorry, for 1 minute. We've been joined by the former President of Ghana, President Mahama. It's very good. Please continue.
So we were having this celebration of 50 years of the Organization of African Unity, which had then been succeeded by the AU. And we then wanted to imagine what people would say 50 years on, what would they celebrate? Because there we are celebrating how our forebearers had liberated us from colonialism, all the efforts they had made to bring us to where we were. So we then said, you know, we may not be here ourselves, but let's try and work towards what celebration would be like 50 years on. And part of the reason we decided on a long view was that when you have a long view, you can really think about what you aspire to, about your dreams, because you have time to put them into place. But if you only look at 4 years, because up to then, we were having strategic plans for 4 years. When you look at 4 years or 5 years, you are constrained by your immediate environment, about your immediate circumstances. You can't break out of them because the time frame is too short. So we thought, let's break out, let's look at 50 years. But we were also wanting to inspire young people and future generations to say, what do we want? Not what other people want for us. What is it that we want? What type of Africa do we want to build? In a way, what type of Africa do we deserve? We think we deserve. Because who will build it? It's ourselves. So we must imagine it ourselves, we must build it ourselves. Because everything that you'll end up be is really what you want. And every other person may assist you, but they are assisting you towards your own aspiration, towards your own goal. So that's what inspired us. And of course, we said, okay, we were just a small, tiny minority at the AU, but Africa has got so many people, so many sectors. So we started consulting with sectors. We even consulted with young people. We had a number of meetings with young people across the continent, workers, culture people, scientists, media, almost everyone you can think of. Even religious leaders. We consulted widely to say, what type of Africa would you like to see? And we gave ourselves time, 2063, in 50 years, where will Africa be? Because as nations, 50 years is a very short time. So then we brought everybody together. By the time we went to our leaders, our heads of state, who had done the consultations, we just asked them to give us that leeway to do it. They gave us. Then we did the consultations and eventually brought to them what the Africans had told us. They added what they wanted to add, and we have Agenda 2063, which is an agenda for Africa. It's not agenda for governments. It's your agenda. It's everybody's agenda. And that's why also we consulted everyone, because each and every one of us, the 1.2 billion of us, must say, what is my contribution to this agenda? What would I contribute to this agenda? So as you are at school, you should be also saying, what are we contributing and what are we going to contribute? And you'll have the longest time to contribute. Ours is getting shorter. Yours would be much longer. So the future is yours, the present is also yours. So as young people, you must fashion and build the future that you want to inherit. You must get involved now, and I'm glad you are. So Agenda 2063 is for all of us. But we also decided to put some benchmarks. What do we want to do in the next 10 years? Because it was going to be difficult to just have a 50-year plan. So the first 10 years, this is what we want to achieve, and so on. But we also said countries should integrate it into their national plans. Because if it remains at the AU, then it remains an AU plan. But once countries also integrate it into their plans, then it really becomes an African. And not only governments, business, everyone should integrate it into whatever they are doing. So that's how it was done, and that's why. And we decided to, I think at the time we really wanted the heads of state to adopt this Agenda 2063, we did a letter to Nkwame. We didn't do a speech, we just read a letter to Nkwame at the summit. And the reason we chose Nkwame is because Nkwame to Africa is equal to liberation. It was the first country, Ghana, to be freed from colonialism. But it's not just that. Kwame said himself, the freedom of Ghana is meaningless unless the whole of Africa is free. So it was that reason when we thought, who should we put as a symbol of this? He himself wanted the whole of Africa to be free. And in every action that he took, it was with that vision that Africa as a whole must be free. So, to the young people, Agenda 2063, we said, is going to be driven on the whole by the youth and by women. And why did we say that? One of the ministers asked us, why are you saying it's going to be driven on the whole by youth and women? What about us, meaning men who were not youth? And we said, you are already driving whatever we are doing. We're not excluding you, but you are already driving whatever we are doing. You are the ones who have brought us here. For better or for worse, we are here because of you. So now we're bringing those who haven't really been in the driving seat of our continent, youth and women, so that all of us are part of driving the agenda. And of course, if you want to get far, you walk together, isn't it? So, because we want to get far on our continent, we decided we must work together, youth, women, and men. But we put some benchmarks, and one of the first things we wanted to achieve was a continental free trade. We said by 2017 we should finish the negotiations. And everybody, the world, said we were crazy. We're not going to do it. We're not going to be able to finish it. We launched the negotiations here in South Africa in 2015. And we said, by 2017, we must be done and sign. And nobody believed us except ourselves as Africans, which should be the case. We should believe in ourselves. And once we believe in ourselves and decide what we want to do for ourselves, we will achieve it. What happened? Indeed, last year, 2018, it was adopted, signed, and this year it's being rectified. So we are there, at least. And that's one of the major achievements of Africa, to be one, to have a continental free trade, because it will increase our trade amongst ourselves, but also with the world. But it must also motivate us to manufacture, to industrialize, to innovate, so that we can then trade not just stones that we dig from the bowel of our earth, but what we make with our hands, as one of you was saying. Innovation that we are going to created by young people who are very innovative. So all I'm saying is, if we believe in ourselves and we decide ourselves as Africans, what do we want? Where do we want to go to? How do we want to get there? And we work together, we will achieve. We will be one of the greatest continents, as long as we keep to that. But if we're not working together, if we Me, if I'm working with President Mahama, and I'm working with John, nobody can tell who's South African and who's not in the street. Let's be honest, can you tell? Nobody can tell who's Ghanaian, who's not, who's Tanzanian, who's not. We're Africans. But we've been made to want to divide ourselves. Even here, we talk a lot about foreigners. But there are lots of foreigners from Europe, from everywhere. We say nothing. And we say foreigners when we see Africans. Agenda 2063 is against that. Agenda 2063 says we must come together, work together. Continental free trade says we must have free movement of goods, because how are you going to trade if there is no free movement of goods and people in the continent? There must be free movement of goods and people across the continent. Now, Ghana, true to Kwame's spirit, have opened Ghana. When I go to Ghana, I don't worry about applying for a visa. I'm an African. I'll get the visa when I arrive at the airport in Ghana. That's how Ghana is. And that's how every African country should be. There are few others, but I'm just quoting Ghana because Kwame is the symbol. And if they didn't do it, they would be betraying him. So you can decide now you want to go to Ghana. You don't have to go to looking for the Ghanaian High Commission, asking for the visa. No, you buy your ticket, you get onto the plane, your visa is being African. You get there, you'll get your visa. So that's how Agenda 2063 sees Africa. And of course, we also see Africa using its resources for the benefit of the Africans. We want to move away from the paradox that is existing now of a rich Africa and poor Africans. We have all the things that make other countries rich in Africa. Whether it's oil, whether it's cobalt, whether everything, uranium, everything that other countries have used to create wealth for their people, we have on our continent. But Africans are poor. Agenda 2063 says we must move from that. We must build wealth from what we have for Africans. Because there is no time, I won't go into what it says, how we should do that. But Agenda 2063 also says that the continent is almost like one big island with 6 other islands, smaller islands. Agenda 2060 says the ocean is an economic space. The ocean is a transport highway. 90% of what we import and export comes to us through the sea. So the maritime highways, but we are not utilizing that space for transport, for scientific research, for tourism, for fisheries. Some people are even now doing deep sea mining. But some of the people who are busy with deep sea mining have nothing to mine in their deep sea. They are mining in other people's deep seas. So, Agenda 2063 says we must look at the ocean economy as a big economic space. Somebody was saying to us the other day, I can't understand a country that has 3,000 kilometers of ocean being poor, meaning South Africa, having poor people. Because the ocean alone should be able to deal with that poverty. So Agenda 2063 is saying, let's focus also on the ocean. Some of the countries have not even claimed their continental shelf, but the ocean is a very big area. So some of you must want to learn about the ocean. There is lots of things that can be done there to create wealth, to develop our countries. Of course, technology. We say that technology must be used, but the most important thing that Agenda 2063 says, our culture, education and everything, but I want to just single one thing. It says our most precious resource is our people. And we must invest in them. And I'm trying to answer some of the questions from the youth, that they have an important role. We must invest in them, whether it's in their academic, whether it's in their practical skills, but we must invest, whether it's their talent in the creative industry, in ICT, in the fourth industrial, artificial intelligence, whatever. We must invest in our young people because they are the most precious resource we have. And why? If we have skilled young people, they'll figure out what to do with the rest. But we can have all the wealth, the resources, because they are not wealth as long as they are under the ground. We can have all those resources. If we haven't skilled our people to turn those resources into wealth for our people, we'll remain poor. So that's what Agenda 2063 is about. Ensuring that we can skill our people, ensure that they can turn whatever we have into wealth for our people, not for other people, for our people. Then we can export things to other people. We can buy what we need from them, but agriculture is also a very important aspect. We have most land that has not been utilized compared to the rest of the world, arable land. So we can actually feed ourselves as a continent and even contribute to feeding the world. But we need our young people to be interested in agriculture. And we need to make agriculture interesting to young people. So we need to ensure that it's not just agriculture, but it's agribusiness, so that the whole value chain, and they can be serious business people from agriculture. So this is what Agenda 2063 says. I will not take too much time. I just thought I should say a bit. Now about corporal punishment. That's a very interesting one, coming from a young person. I will not answer for everyone, but you know, I think it's very important for parents not to abdicate their responsibility for molding kids before they even go to school. Because by the time you go to school, you should at least have a sense that there is some kind of discipline in the world. There is a way of doing things, and so that the teachers will then do what they are supposed to do. I find that children, if you talk to them from a very early age, you teach them where, you know, children want to check your elasticity. They'll keep pushing you. And if they see that you say this is the tram line, then they'll come back and then they'll try and push you again. But if you are firm, without beating them up, you don't have to. If you are firm and they know where the lines that should not be crossed are, they will fall into line without actually needing to be beaten up. And they'll turn up to be very good kids and responsible adults. But the parent must know that when a child throws himself or herself on the ground and throws a tantrum, the parent must say, that doesn't pay. Never going to get anything if you do that. And then the child will know, I never get anything by throwing a tantrum. The child must know there are 2 magic words, please, thank you. Then you get something. But if you scream and kick and you don't get anything, that you must learn at home before you get to school. Then the teachers won't need to do corporal punishment. But when the parents abdicate their responsibility, then they are giving problems that don't belong to the teachers. When a child comes into a place, adults are sitting, talking, comes, jumps onto the table, jumps around, and then the parent says, "Hi, umthetho wakhe." That's how he is. Then you know there is a problem. Then you know there is a problem. So I'm just saying, but it's not easy now, because when we grew up, we had extended families, we had all sorts of people helping. Now young people, they have something that I never knew when I was growing up, called MySpace. Instead of utilizing the resources of the grandmothers, the aunts, to assist them to bring up the kids, no, I want my space. You want your space, and your kids will need corporal punishment at school. So, yes, you can have your space sometime. I must say, I was very lucky when I came back with my 4 kids. With all the busy schedule, my mother was still alive. I persuaded her to come and live with us so that she can instill the same values she instilled in me to my children. It doesn't matter if I can hire somebody else, yes, to assist, but the values, I know that if it's my mother, she will instill the same values she instilled in me in them. So I'm just saying, for me, I'm not convinced that corporal punishment is the answer. I would need to be convinced that really corporal punishment is the answer. But it's something that we should debate. I'm not saying you are wrong about asking for corporal punishment. I think we must engage and convince one another whether it needs to come back or not. So I think in what I've said, I've answered, maybe not directly, that youth should be recognized, of course. Of course, we are very proud of our youth. That's why we're saying we must invest in them. In their talents, we must build their talents. Their talents can be going to the moon. Their talents can be making the shoes. Their talents can be plumbing. It can be anything. But let's invest in that talent. And let's get Africa working. So history is very important. And I think we need to discuss how do we really get proper history imparted to our young people. In South Africa, I can understand that it's very difficult because some of the teachers have a very different perspective of history from the one we have, and so it's still a problem. But history is very important because then it tells you who you are, where you come from, and assists you to know where you are going. So it's very important. And Africa is a very rich history that is suppressed. Before I sit down, you know, about maybe 10 years ago, I was reading one of the American magazines. I can't remember whether it was The Economist or the other one. And they were saying NASA has confirmed what the Dogon people knew since time immemorial about that star that appears once in 50, 60 years. The Dogon people knew that there was a star like that. And the rest of the world didn't know and didn't want to believe them. And they were saying NASA has now confirmed that the Dogon people were correct. Who are the Dogon people? Africans. So there is lots, if we had time, and I'm sure you've heard a lot earlier, about our history, rich civilization. We talk about cities. We had cities in ancient civilization, and some of them were built in such a way that they could withstand the storm, the weather conditions that were there. So we have a rich history. We should be proud of ourselves. Nobody should tell us we're inferior to anyone. We are as good, if not better than anyone, as Africans. Thank you.
Wonderful. We are so lucky today. It's a blessing that we have from God that she's here. And she's not only here alone now. She's very, very busy. We just hijacked her almost. One item, one young lady who is a nuclear scientist. She's talking of people, nuclear scientists would have given a vote of thanks. But before that, and the protocol demands, let me just ask the former president if he has a word to say before I ask the nuclear scientists to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by thanking Madam Zuma for the leadership she gave us at the time that Agenda 2063 was formulated. I had the privilege of being a part of the Authority of Heads of State when she was the president of the AU Commission. And we couldn't have gotten a better person to speak about Agenda 2063 than Madam Zuma, because she was virtually the architect of that document. Of course, the whole of Africa participated, but she was the midwife that delivered that baby. we've had 2 days of intense discussion covering many issues. And I guess it won't do to inflict any more hard discussion on this audience. But I just want to put a few things in context. We've moved from political liberation. That was the period of the armed struggle, starting with Ghana's independence and the famous words Dr. Kwame Nkrumah spoke, that Ghana's independence was meaningless unless it was linked with the total liberation of the continent. From then, we worked together in unity and solidarity to liberate the rest of the continent. I remember as a young person, we had Zambians, we had Kenyans, we had South Africans studying in our schools, carrying Ghanaian passports. And as other countries got liberated, they also joined the struggle. And it was by unity and solidarity that we eventually ensured the total liberation of the continent. As a young man, we marched, we demonstrated, we did sit-ins at the American embassy, the German embassy, to protest the policies of these countries in terms of helping the apartheid regime. We held all kinds of events calling for freedom for Mandela. And all of us were in solidarity with the rest of the countries, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Eventually, as each one got independent, we all celebrated, and we moved on to the next. The countries on the front line paid a heavy price in assisting the ANC to achieve the liberation of South Africa. Indeed, there's an incident I keep repeating after marching for Mandela's freedom and all that. I became a young deputy minister just before the turn of the millennium. And I came to Cape Town for a conference of communications ministers. I was deputy minister of communications. And of course, Mandela was our idol. All of us had, participated in one event or the other. He had become the symbol and icon of African liberation at the time. And so we attended the meeting, and some of us young ministers decided to go out on the town. So went, had a few drinks, and then came back to the hotel. And we were living in different hotels. So I entered my hotel, and I was going up to my room, and so I pressed the lift. And it was past midnight, so I saw the lift was coming. So I mean, you wouldn't expect that there would be anybody in it. And so I stood right in front of the door. And then the door opened. And there was Mandela standing in front of me, coming out of the lift. I almost had a heart attack. I don't know how I stumbled back and created space for him to walk out. And he was accompanied by one woman and a man, 3 of them. And I was tongue-tied. I was in a state of shock. I just stared at him, and he walked out through the door. Apparently, it was his birthday, and they had been celebrating it at the Cape Sun Hotel on the rooftop. And they had closed and were going home, and I was going back to my room. And afterwards, I went into my room after I had come out of the shock. And I said, there's a man you marched for, you did everything, and then God just presents him. And you cannot even say hello. But the point I'm making is that it was solidarity and unity that liberated this continent. And so as we go into the next phase, which is economic emancipation, it is that same solidarity and unity that we need in order to emancipate our continent from new colonialism and economic domination. As Madame said, the Africa we want is a dream, and we must be free to dream. At least, even in poverty, nobody can restrict your ability to dream. And so, if even we're poor, we can dream of the Africa we want our continent to be. And that dream can be as magnificent as anything. it will spare us to be able to achieve it. The whole of last week, they've been showing the Apollo moon landing. I was 10 years old when it happened. 9 years before, President Kennedy, in a statement, had charged NASA that by the end of 10 years, they should land a human being on the moon. I mean, when that statement was made, it was like, is this man crazy? But that was a dream. And 9 years before the deadline he had given, they had landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon, using the technology that was available to them at the time. And as I told you, the computer that fired Apollo 11 and achieved the moon landing had memory or a gigabyte space less than the laptop you use today. And yet with the technology available to them, they achieved what nobody thought could be achieved. And so you can dream, and when you dream, it spares you to try to achieve that dream. And that's why 2063 is a very ambitious document. When it was presented to us heads of states, there were a lot of people who said, oh, but this is too ambitious. I mean, how is Africa going to achieve this? And we said, at least aim for the sun, and if you fall on the moon, at least you've achieved something. And so we adopted it. And as Madame said, all of us must work to integrate it and incorporate it into our national programs. And if we do and we act together, we can achieve it. We've done it with the Millennium Development Goals targeting. It's the first time we had global targeting. And once the UN adopted it and said within 15 years we want to see this, we managed to see the greatest and most significant reduction of poverty in the world, implementing the Millennium Development Goals. Countries like mine achieved universal enrollment in primary school, 97%, 98%. And even then, for the children of cattle herders who are very migrant and nomadic, we have chased them with a program that allows them to go to school in the evenings after they have come back home with the cattle. And so it was global targeting that made us achieve that. We cut hunger, significantly. We cut malnutrition, making sure that every child had enough, food to eat to be able to grow well and not be stunted. And so we can do it as a continent if we work together and incorporate it into our programs. The world order is changing, and it will continue to change. For us growing up as young people, we knew the Cold War, where Russia and US were the two superpowers in the world. And for the young people who probably don't know it, there was what they used to call the Iron Curtain. It was an imaginary curtain that divided the world into two, especially in Europe, where you had the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. And you couldn't cross over the curtain. I'm sure you heard about the fall of the Berlin Wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall marked the end of the Iron Curtain and the end of the Cold War. And at the time we dreamt, we said, look, if these two superpowers stop the arms race, there'll be what we call a peace dividend. Because the amount of money they were spending on nuclear arms was in the trillions of dollars. And we said if they didn't have to use this money for arms, and this money was invested in improving sustainable development in the world, there'll be no hunger, there'll be no poor people. And so when the Berlin Wall fell and the arms race came to an end, we expected that we would see a significant jump in prosperity across the world. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen like that. They quickly found other wars to start fighting. And Iraq happened, Afghanistan, and all that. And if you look at the billions of dollars that have gone into all these wars, including Syria now, and so many, Yemen, then you realize that no peace dividend actually existed, and that these prosperous countries would always seek their own interest. And so the question is, why doesn't Africa too seek its own interest? We must seek our interest too. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course, we live in a global world, and there must be international cooperation and solidarity. But of course, we must seek the interest of our people too. And that is why we must, in everything we do, look at that. There are new trends coming up, and we need to analyze and understand them. There's what we call the rise of populism. There are populist leaders, mostly from the extreme far right, rising into power. There's a rise of unilateralism. Unilateralism means that countries adopt policies depending on their own interest without cooperation with the rest of the world. And I'll just give you one example. We all work together to achieve the climate change agreement. In America, everybody participated. I remember in Paris when the agreement had been signed by all the major players, and all of us had participated and giving our nationally determined goals. And there was a standing ovation, hugging, and all that. And we all left determined to implement it so that we can save this planet. There have always been climate change deniers, people who say there's no climate change, and that it's a hoax. And unfortunately, President Trump is one of them. But the evidence is there for us to see. Today, from yesterday to today, that's the last 48 hours, is seeing the hottest temperature on record in the history of mankind in Europe. Europe is in the northern hemisphere. It's supposed to be a temperate country. And often temperatures never cross 30 degrees. Today, countries in Europe are seeing temperatures over 40 degrees. And they're having to provide water, cold water in places in order that people don't die or collapse from heat exhaustion. Because they're a temperate country, they don't have air conditioning, and they normally seal their windows because of winter. And so they can't even open the windows to be able to get some fresh air in. And so after signing COP21 and all of us agreeing, suddenly you have Mr. Trump. And he pulls America, one of the most significant players in the climate change agreement, out of the agreement. And you have populist leaders who are rising on the back of xenophobia, on the back of racism, and they're using it to claim political power by planting fear in their people, fear of strangers, fear of anything, in order that they can claim political power. And so what is Africa's position in this rising, populist framework in this world? We have in Africa too, not only Africa but across the world, a growing distrust for our established political systems. And so again, that's something we need to begin to think about. You go to the US and Europe, and they believe that there's a hijack of the state system to achieve some sinister motives. And so you must fight against the establishment. And so you have people who believe that there's a deep state. Google deep state, and you'll see the explanation. And that the deep state works against the interests of the people. So they have all kinds of alt-right, white supremacists, and all kinds of people who believe in some of these theories. And so they are willing to work to disrupt the established system. But in Africa, it takes a different form. There's also here a growing distrust of the political establishment. But that is born out of issues like corruption. When people see poverty, they live in poverty, and they believe that their leaders have captured the state and are filching out millions of dollars that could improve their welfare. Then they develop a distrust for the political system. In our part of the world, if people don't see a tangible improvement in their lives, then they begin to question the democratic and governance system. Because every 4 years or 5 years, you're calling them to come out and queue to vote. And if they come out every 4 years or 5 years to vote, and every time you call them out to vote, their circumstances are either the same or have retrogressed, then they ask themselves, what is the use of this whole democratic system? Why must I come out anyway and vote? And so in countries like ours, I meet people and they say, I won't vote the next time. I say, why won't you vote? He says, it's not necessary, it's useless because I don't see any difference it makes to my life. And so one of the things we must do as the political leadership is to make sure that our people see a tangible improvement in their lives. Africa cannot continue at the pace we're going. We don't have enough time. We have a youth bulge that is growing, and even though we say it is an advantage in terms of having a young, virile population, but at the same time, if you have a young, virile population that is idle, then it becomes a disadvantage, it becomes a bomb, and it can explode with very disastrous consequences. And so we need to increase the pace at which our economies are growing and make sure that as the economies grow, the fruits of growth are being distributed fairly along the class chain so that people have the basic social safety nets that make life meaningful. The poor and vulnerable, when they are ill, how do they get good quality health care? What insurance system exists to make sure that at the point of delivery they're able to access health care and probably pay later through a premium or something? These are not rocket science, and they have been implemented before. There's best practice across the continent. We can share those ideas with each other. How do we make sure that the most vulnerable people in our countries are able to send their children to school and not deny their children an education because they cannot afford to pay the fees that are required? These are all things that, as the political establishment, we must continue to think about. Then there's the issue of xenophobia. When things are hard, or when there's an economic recession, you think that your difficult living condition is created by the stranger next door. No, he's not the cause of your difficulty. You have a shop. Let's use a Ghanaian. You have a nice shop. And when the economy is booming, people are coming in and out and buying. And if there's a recession, you have your Nigerian cousin next door. And then you begin to think that because his shop is next door to you, that's why they are not buying your stuff. And if there's a recession, you must adopt some means to ensure that your business survives. And maybe he's adopted those means not because he is of a different nationality than you. And so if we think that our neighbor is taking business or we don't have a job because our neighbor has a business, it is erroneous. If he didn't establish that business probably wouldn't be there anyway. And the point is, if he didn't establish it, do you have the skills to be able to establish that business that he has put up? And as Madam Zuma said, we are all the same people. You can tell the difference between us. I mean, the White people don't make any attempt to distinguish between us anyway, call all of us blacks. So why is it that we should then desegregate ourselves and name ourselves something else? We must be black to all of them. And so that's another issue we need to look at. Like I said, economic emancipation is the next battle that we fight. But we're not going to use the same tools. You don't fight economic emancipation with the machine gun like we did the political liberation. We need knowledge. We need different tools. We need the same unity. We need the same solidarity. But we need to use the knowledge and technology that has been made available to us to fight that new battle of economic emancipation. And that is where our young people come in. They are innovators. They have adapted to the technology. I'm lucky as Minister of Communications, and so I follow the new technology. But as I grow older, you get a bit tired of these new apps and things. And so sometimes when I have a difficulty, I have to call my son and say, look, can't you come and sort this thing out for me? And you'll be surprised at how adept they are at, finding a way. I had an iPod that was getting broken, and I had some very beautiful old tunes on them, my old-fashioned music. And I had bought a new iPod, and I didn't know how to move the music, And he took it, put it on the computer, downloaded some apps and all that. And before I saw, he had moved all the music. I said, how did you do that? And so they are innovators. They have adopted the new technology. And that's why they must come to the table. We cannot marginalize our young people. There are those that are called the disruptors, our youth and our women. Because you want to change a status quo, you must disrupt the status quo. And so how do we bring our disruptors to the table on an equal footing as all of us? With women, by women's empowerment, breaking down the barriers that make women able to achieve their full potential. And they must necessarily come to the table because women form the majority of our population in Africa. And you cannot develop this continent with less than a majority of the population, that is men alone. And that's why the women should be by our side as our partners. And so any misogynistic, thinking that anybody has in respect of our women being able to partake equally in political decision-making must be discarded. You go to most of our parliaments and the women are the minority. I remember when we formed the Pan-African Parliament through the instrumentality of Madam Zuma and others, we were supposed to bring 5 parliamentarians from each country. And we knew as usual that if we didn't put something in there, they'll go and bring 5 men. So we said 5 representatives, at least one of which should be a woman. You'll be surprised, most of the countries follow the protocol. 4 men, 1 woman. 4 men, 1 woman. I don't know if that is still the practice, but if it is, we need to change it and say at least 2 of which must be women or 3 of which must be women. But the country I stand up for is Lesotho. We said 5 women, 5 representatives, 1 of which must be a woman. Lesotho came with 4 women and 1 man. And so I think that I will have to wrap up. The last thing I'll talk about is self-reliance. We need to adopt self-reliance as a continent. As she said, a lot of resources leaving the continent. We don't add value to it. Recently, they said Dubai made $15 billion out of gold refining, most of that gold coming from Africa. And the question is, why do we send all this raw gold to Dubai to be refined there? Because as soon as you refine, the value and the price jumps significantly. And so if we kept that value in, won't we make more money? Dubai doesn't produce any gold. All that gold they're refining is coming from Africa, $15 billion worth of it. You can imagine what we can do with $15 billion on this continent. Every year, China calls us, we go and sit, all of us, cup in hand, and they announce a 60 billion facility for Africa, and all of us are struggling for our share of the 60 billion, when we can make that same money out of our continent. When I became president, I noticed that all the road construction in Ghana was being done by foreign companies. And then in April, all of them were asked to repatriate their profits home. And I said, what is rocket science about road construction? We can have Ghanaian companies that can construct our roads. And so I passed an edict and I told our road ministry, I said, if the money is ours, coming from our own budget, a Ghanaian road construction company must build the road. And when I became president, there were only 6 asphalt plants in Ghana, 5 owned by foreign companies, 1 by a Ghanaian company. By the time I left office, 4 years after, there were 22 asphalt plants. And of the 22, 18 were owned by Ghanaian companies and 4 by foreign companies. I mean, these are some of the actions we can take in order that we empower our own people and make sure that our resources stay within our country and multiply. I mean, if you got up as a South African and you went to China and established a road construction company, I wonder which road you will get to build there. And so we must look at things with a new eye and based on that be able to change things. Import substitution. My country, Ghana, imports $1.5 billion worth of food, vegetable cooking oil, chicken that used to run behind my grandmother's house. Now we import it from Brazil and other places when we have the comparative advantage to raise our own chicken and eat our own chicken. Tomato from Italy, rice. We import $500 million worth of rice. And yet we have the arable land, we have the rainfall, we have the sunshine to be able to grow that rice. And so how can we look within not only our countries, but within Africa, and be able to produce some of these things so that the money circulates within the continent? And so these are issues we need to look at. But I thank the organizers of this conference for the opportunity for us to have been able to exchange ideas. This is particularly unique because then you go to most conferences and it's just our generation, talking at each other. Today we have our young people, and yesterday, and I'm sure today, when they ask the questions, you can see that these young people are not to be underestimated. And so as long as we keep having these dialogues and being able to talk to each other instead of talk at each other, like yesterday I said, do we understand each other? They say we don't listen to them. And we also say they don't hear us, But I think that in this dialogue, we've been able to talk to each other and understand each other. And I believe that more of such dialogues, across the continent will help us to be able to achieve the Africa we want. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Young lady, come, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Senamile Masango. I'm a nuclear scientist. I would like to thank you, Minister and former President, for your visionary leadership as articulated in Agenda 2063. Thank you for your inclusivity. We are grateful for your presence today to inspire us as young generation. Your wisdom will invigorate the vitality of this youth. To young people who are here, you are the future. If I can do it, a young girl from Kwanongoma in deep rural areas, you can also do it. Refuse to be defined by your background and lead. It's time for Africa. Let us unite and build our continent, the Africa we want, where us as African, we can solve our own problem in our own African methods. Thank you so much.
Well, this is the nuclear scientist. As you remember, we also have a flight commandant, a lady who flies. You could not, Air Force, you couldn't have believed at that time that you will have a woman with a flight commander. She flies all over the place. But even more interesting, young ladies, 4 or 3 of them, flew from Cairo, made their own aircraft, and flew from Cairo, from Cape Town to Cairo. Africa is changing, and it's thanks to this leadership here. Before we leave, in the African tradition, I was told that the organizers want to give Honorable Minister a small gift, a remembrance for her presence here. And I think I'll invite Professor Kaya to come and do that. And please, you can bring the yes, yes.